Hello, my good and faithful friends. Jerry Rosa here in the Rosa String Works Workshop. I don't know if I have it in me. I really don't. But I'm going to give it one more shot here. I told you before that I had committed to do one more guitar. And this one is a secret guitar, a surprise guitar, I guess you'd say. And we'll call this the last Hurrah guitar. And let me just show you why it may be more hurrah than most. Let's take a look at that right now. Well, do you see a guitar in there anywhere? These are large chunks of rosewood that I acquired over the years. And honestly, I don't even know where they came from at this point. I know they came from, I wouldn't call them viewers, I don't think, because at that time I don't think I had any viewers. I don't think I was on YouTube when I got these. So I think they came from people that knew I was interested and gave me these rosewood pieces. I've probably had them 15 or more years at least, maybe 20. These are rosewood, at least as far as I know. And this last Hurrah guitar is going to be made from rosewood if we can. That's assuming we can get enough out of this to build a guitar. I think we can. I'm going to mostly concentrate on this piece. I may have to go to that piece. This one's in pretty good shape. It's got some splinters and things. We're going to have to get this flattened off before we can tell if there's a guitar in there or not. And I guess we're going to start on that right now. We're going to work over at the joiner first and start straightening this board up. Let's see how it goes. We're going to give it a shot. I'm really torn as to which way I want to, which face I want to work off of, this face or this face. This face over here is a little flatter already, so I'm going to start with it against the fence and plane off this bottom edge because it's rocking on a knot here, so I'm going to kind of knock that knot off first and see what we've got. I think if I move this fence out as far as it'll go, I might be able to fit the face of this board on there now. We'll see. I'm going to go out and look and see where the edge of the blade goes and move right out to the edge of the blade pretty much. And that's about right there. There might be a minor blemish in the blade, but I think that's okay. You know, we're just roughing this face flat. It looks like it'll be big enough, so let's give it a shot here and see what happens.
You've heard a song about a horse or two. Well, here's one more, and I swear it's true. The finest horse you've ever seen. His name was Phantom 614. A proud young stallion with head held high. His
I don't want to get in too big a hurry. I'm afraid I'm going to just be wasting a lot of good wood here if I'm not careful. This gouge goes really deep and it would take a long time to get this flat enough to use that. So I think I've got this flat enough that at least it's, you know, flat enough to work with it for like fastening to or using it on a fence or something. This side's a lot flatter, so I think we're going to have to work from this side for the sides and the back. I think. It's really hard to say. Boy, it's just really hard to say. It's not an easy decision here. The problem with it, you can't see what I can see, and there's some fine line cracks down through here. I just don't know if they're bad enough to care about or not. They don't seem to go everywhere, so I think we're still going to have to use this side. I don't really think we have too many options. I mean, this side would be great if it wasn't for this big huge gouge out of it, but that's deeper than my finger right there, or as deep as my finger. So we'd be wasting a lot of wood to get it down flat to that. This side I think is only maybe a 1/4 inch out, so we're going to be wasting quite a bit of wood to get it to there, but we'll just have to see what happens, because I don't really have too many other options. We just have to feed it through and see what happens.
Satin under candlelight, his mane and tail, oh how they sheen. His name was Phantom 614.
I don't want to go too far too fast. You know, this is now wide enough here probably. I'm going to do some thinking on it here. It's just about time for me to go to lunch, so I may go do some thinking. There's a lot of little knots in this, and I wish they weren't there. They seem like there are even some on this side, so I don't think we're going to get away from them. Like this one goes all the way through, and some of these go all the way through, so I don't think we have too many options there. It's a beautiful piece of wood. It'll still make a beautiful guitar regardless. Those little knots just maybe even add a little character. We'll see what happens. The next step in the process for making the sides out of this rosewood is to try to get a fairly straight board out of this. As you can see, it's very much wedge or pie shaped at the moment. And that pie shape just ain't that good for working with. So we're going to cut a flat board out of it. And I've got the fence set at 1 1/8 inches. Once I get a flat board out of this, then I might be able to, or once I get it reasonably smooth and a flat board, then I can move over to the Accu-Slice and slice the sides and the back out of this. But I put a new blade in this, or not a new blade actually, it's a blade that's been used, but it's a much bigger tooth blade for the resaw. And all I can say is we'll cross our fingers and hope it all goes well, because here we go. Sawing a very expensive piece of wood. Well, it was difficult to maintain focus there, as I got a pretty big splinter and another splinter. And believe it or not, these exotics actually burn worse because you got some kind of chemicals and oils in them. So I got to get those splinters out here, and I'll be right back. Well, we do have a nice board here. You can see the different grain in it. It's a beautiful board, and it's going to make a nice guitar. It's not perfectly quarter sawn like I prefer, but you can only get what you can get out of a board, you know, and we'll get the best we can out of it. I'm bleeding all over it because of the splinters. But, you know, if you don't put a little blood, sweat, and tear into your work, then your work ain't worth nothing. Okay, this is still quite angled on this edge. I'm not sure I'm going to worry about that too much. I'm debating on whether or not I want to fix this side to the Accu-Slice and slice it through there and start making sides and things and backs. We'll see what my next step is. I'm not quite sure myself. I've got some tape applied to my sacrificial board and some tape applied to the rosewood board. And keep in mind, this is the Accu-Slice system furnished to me by John Manura. And I, know that John likes these attached better, and he's kind of scolded me for doing it this way a little bit, in a nice way. But you know, so far I've had real good luck with putting the two pieces of tape and using the CA glue between them. I'm going to do that again. You know, I'm sure John is correct that this was going to bite me in the butt one of these days. But so far it's been working pretty well. And I'm just going to go ahead and go with it this time and hope it doesn't bite me this time. You know me, I like easy. If it's complicated or more difficult, I'm not into it. So far this has worked out pretty well. I just hope it does this time. Got the glue on there. Now the trick is to get it on here before it runs all over the place, and that might be a problem. Got it on there, and I'm trying to hold it while the glue sets up, and I forgot to get my clamps. So hopefully it won't mess me up here. I should have got some clamps. I think it's going to sit there long enough to get clamps, I hope. Alright, those two are on there. Now let me get some more. Got some long reach clamps that'll reach up in here a little bit. And I'm not going to put a lot of pressure on it. I don't want to dip the wood too much, but I'm just putting enough pressure on it to hold it firm. Okay, so I've got clamps on there holding it firm. I'm going to let that sit maybe 15-20 minutes before I move on. Okay, my friends, I've got everything ready to go here. I have aligned this board, for whatever reason, isn't sitting perfectly square to the saw. It's off by a little tiny amount, and I don't know if it's just the way I have the Accu-Slice mounted or if it's the board itself. After the first cut, I don't think it'll make any difference. All right, so I'm gonna dial in 50 thousandths for the blade thickness. Then I'm gonna dial in another 50 thousandths cut and another 50 thousandths cut, and that gives me 100 thousandths board right there, or it should. And to play it safe on this one, I'm going to dial in another 15 thousandths. There's 5, 10, 15. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and dial in 20. Just because I want to play it safe and make sure that this first board is still usable. And I think it should be. That's about as good as I can do, I think. I'm going to close off all my other dust ports, get the dust port open to the bandsaw, and we are now going to turn on the vacuum and the saw. A lot of these blades just don't run perfectly true. You know, it seems to cut fine, but they just don't run perfectly true. I don't have a ton of blade damage in here, just a little bit. I think it's working okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make the next one. Alright, so I'll loosen up my magnetic clamps. I'll dial in 50 thousandths for the blade. I'll dial in 50 thousandths for the cut, and then another 50 thousandths for the cut. There's 100 thousandths. That should give me 100 thousandths board. And after doing that, I'm not sure that's what I want. I kind of wanted about a 90 thousandths. So I'm going to back it off 10. And there's backlash. I shouldn't have done it this way. Alright, so I'll back it up to 20. I'm going to go ahead and back it up to 0, and then I'll move it forward to 20. That should help get rid of the backlash, I hope. Anyway, board, that should give me a 90 thousandths board. And that should be enough. there is a lot of dust accumulating here. I've already collected it, so people, you don't have to tell me to collect it and save it. I've already collected a cupful in a shot off camera. Anyway, I guess I'm going to go ahead and cut it again. Because there's so much dust on this one, I'm going to put on a dust mask. This is not a COVID thing, this is a rosewood thing. Let's give it another shot. Here we go.
Though just a young man at the time, I knew that one day he'd be mine, and I would ride there like a king up on the back of six.
That worked just fine, and I think I've got a good 90 thousandths piece there. I'm going to go back to the 100 thousandths on each one of these from this point on. I'm just a little chicken that I might be cutting them a little too thin. Although I think that's perfectly fine, but you just, you know, I'm trying to get as much yield out of this as I can. So anyway, we'll do that. I'm going to vacuum up the sawdust on top here. I'm going to undo my clamps. I'm going to dial in 50 thousandths for the blade. I'm going to dial in 50 thousandths for the cut, and then another 50 thousandths for the cut, and therefore I have 100 thousandths forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that you could take this as a commercial if you want to. I have nothing to gain one way or the other. I've already got this thing. He gave it to me. He didn't give it to me with any stipulations that I had to say anything good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just telling you straight up and down. I'm just being perfectly truthful. When I first got the thing, I thought, wow, this looks like kind of a hassle. It goes on real easy. You just set it right on top of your saw. You tighten up 3 little nuts with an Allen key. Very easy to tighten. And they're like a half a turn. That's all you got to do. About a half a turn per Allen. 3 of them. That's it. That locks it into the fence slot. Then you got to get yourself a sacrificial board and cut it true to your blade. And then you know, I'm attaching them with basically with 2-way tape is about what it amounts to. But you saw what I did. I used masking tape and CA glue. Anyway, it's worth your time and it's worth your effort. You can't run them through your fence and get them this nice. And the reason I know that is I've done that for years, and it was always such a hassle, and I was always so afraid I was going to ruin a piece, because I did ruin a lot of pieces over the years. But with this thing, it kind of takes all that fear out of that. It just tracks perfectly. It just works perfectly. I mean, gee whiz, I can't tell you enough. It's an expensive rig. But, you know, we've said before, good tools are expensive. So this is expensive. If you're only going to make one guitar, you probably don't need this. But if you plan to cut a lot of sides, a lot of backs, a lot of thin veneers for other kinds of furniture, or decorative boxes, or anything like that, you really ought to get you one of these things. I promise you, you won't be sad spending the money. You will love this thing once you get used to using it. Takes a little bit of a learning curve, but not a big learning curve, just a little bit. And once you get used to it, it's worth every penny. Here we go.
The trainer said, son, he can't be rode. Stay away, boy, or you'll be thrown. He said that horse is just plain mean. His name was Phantom 614. Souls were one. Without any fear I climbed upon the back of the one they said was me. His name was Phantom.
Well, my friends, out of a 1 1/8 inch board, I got 8 solid pieces. And that's including the one that's still attached. Now that's assuming I can get it loose, and I think I can. It seems to come off fairly okay. There, it's breaking loose. There it is. There it did. It came off. The tape came undone. You know, this is my method of choice. I got to tell you, this using the 2 pieces of masking tape with CA glue between them seems to be a very viable way to attach this. I know John has, you know, cautioned me against it and to do it a different way, but I got to tell you, I'm pretty happy with this. This is about my 4th or 5th time I've done it this way now, and I have had nothing but good results. So, you know, I'm sure there's a reason he's cautioning me, and that's okay. You know, he knows his tool better than I do. I'm not trying to say I know better. But so far, this has worked out really well. You know, I'm just the kind of guy that if something is complicated, I won't do it, you know. Because I can keep this simple, then this thing is, I'm all over this thing. If I had to make it more complicated, no, I wouldn't be all over it. But because I can keep it this simple, and that's really not very difficult to attach this way. Some people say, you know, you could attach it with screws, and in some circumstances where you only need a little piece of veneer on a thick board, you could do that. But on a case like this where you want to use every piece of your board, you know, with this expensive wood, well then gluing it down like this with the tape seems to be the right answer. It's a little bit fidgety getting the tape back off, but you could get that off fairly easy. Just spend a little time with it. You can see there I'm struggling with that just a little bit, but overall it's not bad. That last piece might be a little thinner, I don't know, but I still think it's thick enough to use. Nah, it might be a little bit thin. But you never know when you start on this how, you know, I used a 1 1/8 inch board. I just arbitrarily picked that number. Had I made it just slightly thicker, then that last board would have turned out real nice too. So keep that in mind in case you got to recut something. But man, that's awesome. There's no way I could have got 8 boards out of that running it along a fence. There is no way that would have happened. Trust me, I've been there, done that a million times, and there is no way I could have done that. Let me count the boards here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And like I said, the 8th board looks like it might be a little thin. Let's just measure it. I don't think it's crazy thin, but it's thin. Yeah, 50 thousandths. So it'd be a good, you know, you could use it for peg head veneer. You know, it's not a wasted board by any stretch. So we may use that for the peg head on this guitar. Either way, it's, you know, if I'd have thought about it and made it just a little bit wider, then we'd had one more fully good board there. So keep that in mind if you decide to do this. Make it maybe add another 1/16 on there or something. You'll be just fine. Well, you saw me cut all this out on that Accu-Slice. It did a wonderful job. It really did. I couldn't be happier with it. Now I have to decide how we're going to set it up for the sides and the back, and I think we've already got that figured out here. I've got some tape on the pieces, and I'll show you what I've decided. This piece here was the thin piece, so it's kind of a discard. It's not really a discard because it can be a veneer for peg heads and things like that, but it's not going to work for the sides or the back. Let's see here. I've got these marked, I believe. These will be the backs here, and these will be the sides, and these are extra sides down the road. So we'll just put all this aside for now. No pun intended. So now I need to, these, I've got them taped the way they grew. So, in other words, these two inside edges were together. So those are the most alike. So those have to go to the outside of the guitar then. That way, you know, one side of the guitar will match the other side of the guitar. So I've got to keep that in that orientation. I mean, it's fairly easy anyway because there's such an angle on this that I can tell this goes where it goes. So if I did get them mixed up, at least for now, I could tell that. So I guess I might as well start thinking about getting these looking more like a set of sides. There's a lot of roughness in there. I'm going to have to sand it quite a bit. And just not sure what I want to do first. That blade I cut these with wasn't the very best blade. The Accu-Slice itself did a great job, but the blade itself, that blade it's a pretty rough old blade. It's kind of got a lot of vibration in it and stuff. But I still think it's good enough to make a set of sides out of. At least I hope it is. I think I'll get my side pattern and kind of lay it on here and start thinking about the look of it and how I want it to look. Oh yeah, and those of you that follow me and follow all the videos, you might recognize this from my screw up when I made the neck for the 12 string. This is just a glue up, so it's really not that far along, but it saves me some work. So I can use that for the neck on this guitar when we get there. Well, catastrophe on the last Hurrah guitar. Yeah, the old timer's disease is getting to me. Went to all that work, not for nothing, but a lot more work than I thought I needed to go through. Looky here. This is the side pattern. Notice that the side extends past the length of the wood there. And keep in mind, this side pattern is probably a 1/2 inch short. So this wood is about at least an inch, inch and a half short. In other words, I need about a 31-inch piece, and this measures quite a bit less than that. This measures 29 inches roughly. Of course, it's a little angular, so it almost makes 30 inches depending on how you measure it. But anyway, it doesn't matter, it's too short. I had in my head that I just needed a piece of wood that was at least 28 inches long, and I found this up on the shelf. It was measured 29 inches plus, so I said, well, that's long enough, and I just started cutting it up. Didn't bother to get my sides out and measure them for sure, just kind of going on my memory. And as we've proved in the past, my memory's no good. So, there you go. It wasn't for nothing. I mean, I can still use these for, you know, backs of guitars and things. In fact, that's how I'm going to proceed. I'm going to keep these 3 for the back, and I've ordered some rosewood that appears to match it in the photo pretty well. So we'll see how that goes. But anyway, we will wait for those sides. Meanwhile, I guess I can start working on the back. Due to my little debacle on the sides, I've decided to wait until the sides get here to work on the back and the sides, because who knows, if the sides that come in don't match that well, we may end up starting from scratch. Who knows what we'll do. Anyway, so I decided to turn my attention to the top. Off camera, I ran these sides through the joiner, and on the very first pass, I cannot see any light through there at all. It's a perfect joint. I went ahead and ran them across a piece of 220 sandpaper just to make sure on a flat surface, and held them up to the brightest light I got around here, and I can't see any light through it, so it's as good as it gets. This top board cost me, these two boards cost me $100 each, or $200 for the pair. And it's got a nice sound. Got a real nice tone. Sustains really well. Very straight grain. I don't know. It's getting, the camera's washing out so bad. I don't know if you can see the grain in there or not. But I think you can. Very straight grain. Pretty much could put a ruler on there and you won't even see any variance. It's really very good. So that's just about as good as it gets. I'm going to run them through my thickness sander now and take them down to what I believe will be the right thickness. So here we go. We're at my thickness sander. I've got the sides ready to go. One side's already pretty smooth, so we're going to use that as the down side here, and we'll sand off the top. Once you start sanding these, you can't, a lot of times can't tell how they go back together. They've been marked from the guy that sawed them up with these marks here so that you can keep them aligned. So what I do is I mark on the ends. These two ends go together like that. You really can't mix that up as long as you mark it some way like that. So I can turn these any way I want to, but I know that those two black marks need to go together. If you can see them here on the end, this little black mark is what I'm pointing to. So anyway, they're marked and here we go. Let me get the sander set approximately right. What I do is I just lower the table until this slides through kind of on its own. I can tell it's rolling the sander a little bit. And my first pass I usually just go with it. So we'll see how it goes.
A one-man horse to me proved true. The people would stare as we ride through. A sight which few have ever seen. His name was Phantom 614. His name was Phantom 614.
We're still real thick. We're 175 thousandths on that one. This one seems to be a little thinner for some reason, although it's measuring about the same, 174 thousandths. So anyway, I'll finish that up off camera and show you what the next step looks like. You can see I've got the top thinned down and I've got the two edges joined together. I have a very thin strip of wood, about an 1/8 inch thick or so, underneath the seam. So this is kind of like a very low roof is what it amounts to. I've got a straight edge here, clamped to the table. The table's pretty flat. I've got some paper down to catch any squeeze out. And we'll put the glue along this edge. This will show you how steady your hand is if you can keep the glue on that edge. Of course, the glue is not coming out except in globs, which is not good. Well, that was about the poorest job of glue spreading I've ever done in my life, I think. Pretty sure that was the worst. Got a pretty good coat of it on there. Didn't mean to wipe it on the paper. That wasn't smart. Well, I'm doing my best to make the biggest mess possible. Got the glue spread on the first edge. This is only 100 thousandths of an inch thick. Technically it's about 103 thousandths, but who's counting? Again, it's not spreading very good for some reason. I think the glue's just a little thicker than normal. I went all over the place looking for some Titebond Original the other day at the box stores, and I don't know if it's due to COVID or what, but they had it, but all the bottles were just looked like they had dried inside the bottle, and this was the best bottle I could find, and I'm not sure it's good enough. So there you go. I'll pull the strip out when we press this down, it basically tightens itself up. We've got a little bit of water here. Try to clean up the little bit of squeeze out that I can. And then one of the important things I've learned over the years is to roll this seam a couple of times, 3 or 4 times, to make sure it's good and flat. It doesn't matter how good you think you got it, you never get it as good as you need it. So, rolling it several times like that, and now I'll get something flat to sit on top of it. This bolt and screw drawer is extremely heavy, so I'll lay it right down the seam there. And that ought to do it. It's about as flat as it'll ever be, I imagine. I'm just rolling down the other edges and things just to make sure they're down where they ought to be. But it's good, and we'll just let that set overnight probably, at least till the end of the day for sure. Well, you can see the profile of the neck there that I have cut out. I think before I go any further though, I think what I'll do is just go ahead and cut the truss rod slot in here while I've got this all squared up, and then I'll cut this profile out. Well, I know I said I was going to cut the truss rod in there, but I forgot the fact that I had the top over there on top of the table saw glued up. And I gotta wait on that. So instead of cutting the truss rod slot, I'll go ahead and cut this profile. It won't matter as long as I keep these edges straight, but I'll just cut out the face profile here. So that's what I'm gonna do. Got the table saw set up to cut this truss rod slot. I have it set to 3/8 of an inch deep, high, or whatever you want to refer to it as, and I have it on the center line of this. So we run it through, then we turn it around, we run it through again. That gets the slot exactly in the center. That's assuming your outside pieces are the same size, of course. I'm shooting for 3/16, so that's 1.875. There's 1.88 right there, so that's close enough. And that's pretty dang close. I'd say that's just about perfect right there. In fact, it might be a hair tight, only because, you know, we just have to wait and put the rod in there to make sure. But I'm going to leave it right there for now. That's pretty much just dead center. You can see there's still white on both sides there, and very thin white. And to be perfectly honest, it's a little thinner on this side than it is on this side. So it's just a hair off center, but I mean, you're only talking a few thousandths. So it's pretty darn good. We'll accept that and wait until we get a rod here and see how it fits. Once again, I've got the pattern from the D28 Martin guitar that I traced. It was Gene and Walt Henry's son's guitar. He was killed in a car accident when he was a young man, and Gene and Walt were good friends of ours that came to all the bluegrass festivals and bluegrass shows and just the jams and everything. In fact, they hosted a jam at their house for years. Walt was a World War II veteran. He was on the Oklahoma when it was sunk. In fact, he wound up in the water, fuel all around him and fire everywhere, and had to be rescued out of the water. So he's a true American hero, or he was a true American hero. Good old guy. Still splitting his own firewood into his mid-90s. Just enjoyed the heck out of him. He was a good guy. And his wife, Jean, was a fantastic piano player. Miss them both. And I started off camera to trace that little center hole. And when I turned the camera on, I forgot to go back and do that. So let me line it back up here best I can. That looks pretty good. That looks close enough. So we'll trace the center hole there. So now that that's there. Okay. So that's a nice clear looking top. It's about as straight a grain and a top that you'll ever find. Just about perfect. So we'll cut that out. The reason I use the dark marker is not only to see it, but it's to give me that wide line, and I cut outside the line, and that way I've got plenty of margin there for moving things around in case the sides are not perfect, you know. And not that I would make a guitar that the sides weren't perfect, but you know, it gives you a little bit of fudge factor. All right, we're all set up to cut this out, and I'll turn on the vacuum. Working on the truss rod on this last Hurrah guitar, and I'm just trying to figure out how long I want to make it here. The slot is the perfect size. You can't really get it any better than that. It fits in there, and there's just absolutely no play back and forth. I mean, like 1/1000th of an inch is about all the play there is, which is perfect. So I'm just trying to decide how long I want it here. I want to make sure it's plenty long. I can always cut it off. So I'll probably go right about there. That'll be more than enough length, I'm sure. So I'll cut it off here and thread both ends, and I'll show you how I do that. We're over on the dark side at the metal lathe, and excuse the background noise, but I had to turn the furnace on because it's just chilled over here, and I'm in just a t-shirt, so I had to warm it up a little bit. It's warm on the other side. Anyway, I've got a 1024 die here to cut the threads, and it's a little miniature set. I think I just bought it at one of the big hardware box stores. I think it's a Irwin brand. Seems to work pretty well. Need to cut 1024 threads. I've already got a nut that I made a while back that's going to fit this. I ran the 1024 tap in here to make sure it was the right threads. So if we cut the right threads here, then this nut will thread right on there, and that'll be the nut for the truss rod end that you would adjust. Now, I'm just going to do this I'm doing it in the lathe because the lathe helps you keep the threads really straight. You can start this without a lathe, so if you don't have a lathe, don't feel bad. I've done gazillions of these before I had my lathe, and you can do it by hand. It's just that the lathe helps you really get it straight And straight is good on this kind of thing, and I know you can't see what I'm doing there, but basically I'm just spinning this and I'm putting some pressure on this to force it that way as I spin it. In fact, I'm going to put this in here. By the way, I have the safety switch pushed off on this thing so it can't start, in case anybody's got any questions about that. I don't have it unplugged. You could unplug it, would be a good thing, but the extra safety switch kills everything, so I've got that killed. Anyway, so it seems to be starting there. I keep putting a little bit of back pressure on this. Once I get it started fairly good, I like to back it up before too long and cut the, that kind of cuts the burr off the threads. And then we'll tighten it up and do some more. Let me get you a different camera angle. I'm not really sure there is a good camera angle for this because I have to get my big hands in there. Now that it's started, I don't really need the back pressure on this too much because it's started pretty straight, I'm sure. But I'll keep it on there for a little while. All right, I'm about to back it up again. It's not a bad idea to put oil on your threads when you're doing this. I have not done that yet. I've got all kinds of oil, but 3-in-1 is just handy and it works just fine for stuff like this. Give it a little turn and then back it up. Little turn like that and back it up. That's the way I do it. A lot of guys just keep spinning it in, and you can do that, and probably 9 times out of 10 it'll be fine. But this just helps make sure you don't strip your threads. Take it off there. You can see the threads that are cut on there, I believe. I'll zoom it in for you. So you can see the threads, and those are not long enough yet, but our castle nut should fit right on there now, I think. Yep, goes right on. So anyway, that all works. So I'll finish the rest of that off camera, but that just shows you what the process is like. I have threaded the other side of the rod too, and that's to put a nut on there that will be the anchor point. This is the long threaded rod that will adjust with the nut, and this is the anchor point. So I just took a little piece of square steel, drilled a 25 size hole in there. A 25 drill is the size for a 1024 tap to make a real tight thread, and I do want a tight thread. So I've got my tap there, put a little oil around it. I got the tap basically started. I'm not too worried about getting this one perfectly straight, though the straighter the better. And it seems to be going right in, no problem. Won't take long to go through a thin piece of steel like this. It's not very thick. It's probably a little less than an 1/8 inch thick. I'd say roughly 100 thousandths. It's almost through. It's pretty much through already, I can tell. So now we'll just run it on through, just to clean the threads real good. Just run the tap down in there. I like to do that pretty far down in there, and then take the tap back out. Now, with any luck at all, this rod should thread in there, and it does, no problem. So there's our anchor point back at the heel of the neck. We can route out a little cavity, cement that down in the cavity with some epoxy or whatever to fill the void, and then that won't pull out, and you can tighten on this. This will have an underbow in it, and when you tighten on this, this will lift the middle up in the middle of the neck. That's all that a truss rod does. Nothing more than that. People think it changes the angle, changes the action, all that. All it does is straighten the middle of the neck or relieve the middle of the neck if that's your preference. I've got the nut screwed on here hand tight. I've got some MAP gas, you can see here, if it focuses. And anyway, this is just your standard off-the-shelf MAP gas. But if you stick this rod out enough so that the vise doesn't steal your heat, this should work on a small part like this. You can buy these little brazing rods at your box store in the welding section. So here we go, let's see if it works. By the way, these are flux-coated brazing rods that you would definitely want to get that type or get flux to go with it, one of the two. The flux-coated is just easier, and you can see there, I believe, how it brazed that up. Brazing is much stronger than solder. You could do solder and I think you'd be fine, but I like to do the brazing because I'm pretty sure that's not going to come loose with the brazing. Now you make sure you clean that really good before you braze it, by the way. I cleaned it on both sides all the way around with a wire wheel, and I didn't show that, but I cleaned it really good first. That helps your brazing stick a lot better. That's all there is to it. Now I just cool it off and go install it, or at least see how it looks in the guitar. Probably won't install it yet. Well, if the footage turned out, you saw me braze this on the end there. Of course, you even saw me make the threads and everything else too. So the rod is finished. Now basically we just lay this on here and decide where it needs to, how far it needs to protrude. I like, you know, this is roughly the end of it right here at this line where the transition from the flat up here to the angled here. So I like to have, you know, a good amount of thread coming past that point. It's going to be straight down, and that will ensure that you've got enough thread to tighten up later. So I've got about 1/4 inch past there. I think that's pretty good. And I've got this set right here. So what I'll do is draw a little line around this. And this is the area that I need to chop out. So this goes down in there where we can anchor it. So you can see there, I think. And the easiest way for me to do that is just to take the Dremel tool and wallow out a hole there, and it should work just fine. So that's what I'll do. I have a real small cutter on the Dremel. The problem with it is that it loads up really fast, so I may have to go to something better. Well, if you can't earn your way through, just burn your way through. That's pretty much what I'm doing there. And it's getting close. It's not ready, I don't think, yet, but just giving an idea here. I think it's going to work. I'll just do a little more. It's a little tight still, but getting very close. Try to make them as tight as I can make them because it's stronger that way. That's got to be pretty close. It's close, but I think I'm going to have to do a little rounding off because the braze area in the back is kind of swelled up here, so I'm going to have to round these back corners off to let the braze go down in there, I think. Well, that might do it. Getting close. It's still a little tight, I think. Doggone it. I could probably force it in there, but if I did that, I might split something and break it. I don't want to force it in there. I want it to go down in there on its own. we're getting close. I'll work on it some more off camera and show you what it looks like once I get her in there. Oh, it's really simple once you turn the camera off. It went right down in there, no problem. Perfectly flat just about on the top there, and if that sticks up a little bit, I'll just take the Dremel and grind that metal off or whatever, but it's pretty flat right now. That just gets it in there. Now it's still straight at the moment, so what I want to do now is put a little underbow in this, and you have to put a little underbow in this, and then you have to re-straighten the end where it kind of goes that way. You know, like in other words, you don't want it tipped up like this. You want the very end to go back down a little bit. So I use a real high-tech procedure to do this. I'll show you how I do that, because I want to make sure it's perfect, you know. So here's my procedure. That's kind of hard on my thumbs, but that's how I do it anyway. Used to be a lot easier to do that, actually. That kind of hurts now. Since that hurts a little bit, I think I'll just put this in the vise, this end, and I'll stick it down in there about an inch or so in the vise, and then I can kind of straighten the back end back a little bit again. So you can probably see there that there's a underbow here, then this straightens out, and now I need to kind of straighten out the same thing. And I want to keep it perpendicular to the little nut here. You can't see all this on screen, I don't think. Okay, so I've got the nut perpendicular to the vise as much as I can, that is, and I'm basically just looking straight down. And that gives you a pretty good view of it. And then I'm just going to straighten this back out a little bit. So not very much, just a little bit, just so that these two ends are pretty much opposing one another now, and there's an underbow in the middle. And that's really all you need to do. Very high-tech procedure. Now let's see if it still fits in here. That's the trick. After you do this, it might not fit in here. But it does. It lifts a little bit right here, but that's okay because you're going to have a filler board in here that's going to follow this curve, and that'll hold that down. That's really pretty good. And I'm not going to install this right now. I'm going to, wait till we're further along before I actually install it. But it's all ready to go now, and I don't have to deal with it later. So we can set that aside as a part that we'll use a little later on.